Hello, everyone. Good morning. Welcome back to episode 7 of Pinnacle BIM series. My name is Ayush Awasthi, and I'll be your moderator today. I, I work as a technical coordinator in Pinnacle Infotech. I have two speakers with me today. So I would like them to introduce themselves. Over to you, Vinayak.
Hi everyone, my name is Vinayak Mathur and I'm working as a manager at Pinnacle Infotech for BIM MEP.
Hi, my name is Paul Darrigan. I'm the director for our industrial division for North America.
Thank you guys for introducing yourselves. Today our topic is modular construction. And in this topic, we'll be covering a couple of things like introduction to modules. What is the history of modernization, the technological development since then? What are their impact on the construction industry, the significance and challenges, and what the future holds? So like guys, what is modular construction? My idea of it is just like an assembly of multiple elements or a single unit, so which we can create in fabrication shop, and then we can take over to the construction site and install it to save the time, save the cost. What do you think?
Agree. Modularization is the uh, backbone of quick assembly out in the field.
I think definitely helps with a reduction in the process time for construction. And of course, the process time and or the construction time as a whole plays an important role in the construction industry itself about, if I want to build something, how long is it going to take? So addressing that particular aspect and how major of an aspect it is, I think modularization is pretty much expected to play a large role in this.
And as we understand, in today's scenario, moderation is in each and every field of construction. It is out there in residential, in commercial, and then industrial. It is playing a big game. So, like if we talk about moderation beginning, where did it start? So, in early 1900s, there was a company which we started moderation homes in Europe continent. Apologies for that. So, they printed out to separate papers with their designs, with their layouts, and then they sold it out to public, and it became famous. It hit really good, and people started purchasing these modular homes. It was constructed over the fabrication shop, and then it was directly delivered and installed on the sites. After but after the World War II era, it really took off. During the World War II, a lot of like residential and areas, they were destroyed. So whole towns were built overnight using moderations, and since then it has become very popular in the construction industry. Previously, it started from the homes, from the living apartments or condos. But now, in today's era, we have developed or we have moved on to multiple segments. While we are not reserved to a moderation, we are not reserved to residential. We have gone to commercial, we have gone to industrial. So, if we take an example, like in today's era of industrial, we have big, large bore pipes of 64 inches dia, and we take the material out directly in the site and install it, and then cut it, weld it. So that's going to take a lot of space in your construction site. So to remove that space, to build out all those things, today's contractor, they are using moderation, they are using fabrication shop, uh, they are fabricating all these spools, and then they are transporting it, they are installing it. So and it's just not even pipe spools these days. They are using the structure as well along with that. So this is another example of the structure module in which a large small bore piping along with a lot of racks, like net of structure, steel frame. This is like as I was talking, in industrial, in commercial, we have those valve assembly, the gas unit, and your pipe, your oiling unit, and they are using the for the valve assembly, valve manifolds. They are using the modularization only. So this is just a like typical example of how it's going to be, what kind of drawing they are using to construct. So Paul, what do you think? Like you have worked in construction industry, industrial construction industry for a long time. So what do you think about this particular drawing? What kind of information and level of detailing in it?
Well, you've got the controls that allow it for quicker assembly, more precise assembly, and more efficient. And you also don't have weather as a delaying factor.
So, Vinayak, like you have been working in commercial segment a lot, and you have seen all those big stadiums and hospitals and multiple kind of commercial and residential projects you have come across. So, what do you think is the impact and like moderation in those industry, and how it like is it getting bigger, or is it like reserved to piping, HVAC? And the steel or the main runs on the corridors, or is it getting to each and every space out in the building?
Well, Ayush, if we speak about, I mean, this varies with segments across different industries. But for example, the National Health Services in the UK is one big example of, they've set up hospital chains across the entire country in the UK. So that does require, if you look at the situation and how modularization comes into play for that particular set situation, we see that let's say I have to build a hospital. I have a set a deadline of of sorts that I have to incorporate implement this project, have this hospital ready for the masses by a certain let's say a short span of years basically. So I have a short deadline of sorts, and I see that the hospital as a building would be having this situation where there would be identical spaces, which would be identical in terms of structure, architecture, their purpose, meaning the med gas piping runs, and this. If we talk about, let's say, particular operation rooms, and that would basically mean that there's a slight sense of identicality here. So this is where I can basically break this down as small modules. And what if I basically build all these things off-site to avoid any of these construction delays, have these modules prepped out and prepared with all these pipings and these assemblies done and placed in as one single module, and have these placed out side by side and basically as per the entire plan of that building. So I think in these situations where there's high demand, there's a kind of a time constraint. This is where I think modularization can more aptly fit in these situations. So I think that's how it helps a lot to reduce this process time, and of course with the productivity aspect as well.
Ayush, I'd like to point out a few things with modular construction. In my younger years, I worked at a chemical facility with a byproduct of a programmed wafer, and the amount of facilities that went into this site, they did majority of it in modularization. They built the facilities off-site and erected them in the building. Now, the point that I want to make to this is the normal amount of people that it would take to do it on-site would be somewhere in the range of 20 people. By fabricating off-site and then erecting on-site, it took on an average about 4 people to jack the modular structures into place and secure them versus having 20 people for the same physical area.
No, that is great. That's what I'm saying, Paul. Like, as Vinay pointed out, the hospital part, and that got me thinking about, how we have come across the clean rooms. We have come across dry etch and, like lithography areas, all those in the industrial segment where we talk about the pharmaceutical segment, we talk about the microelectronics, bio plants, biogas plants, and all the chemical plants. So we have those areas, and that is the most or more very important part of the architecture and structure in the industrial segment. Otherwise it is just structure and piping, a lot of piping and equipments. So all those things, they are like in today's day, they are modularized. People are getting modularized clean rooms, and they are like fabricating it on in the fabrication shop, like clean rooms getting in a comparted into a module. So that is the like today's technological advancement in this. So, like this is just a typical example of the skate project and the module, a small unit of modules and compiled with multi and bigger, take a big shape. So this was, if I remember correctly, this particular one in the red and blue, this was part of the dairy plant. And the dairy plant, they had multiple of these modules placed in whole floor and was getting connected to the vents, getting connected to the inputs, and there was minimum piping just to connect these modules in between. So everything they built on site, or sorry, in the shop, went on site, erected it, and the time saving, the cost saving in that, it was very huge. So, as we are talking about the technological development in the modernization, so we have come across from pinpointing or hand sketching a spool or hand sketching a drawing or creating engineering drawings with dimensions and everything to BIM era, where we have this collaborative softwares, we have the approach, we have the technology to develop the model without any clashes. We have the technology to detail the model with the requirement of the fabrication, with the requirement of on site, with the requirement of purchasing, procurement, and all those like constraints that we felt during past. So all these collaborative software now are there for available for the industry. So the BIM integration has what do you think, Vinayak and Paul? What do you think? Like BIM integration, has it developed or has it made or made the construction industry reach the height that we are here today?
It's a huge impact. Go ahead, Vinayak.
Yeah, sorry. Uh, so I wanted to add to the part here, Ayush, with if we go back to the history a little, wherein modernization started post World War, and there was there's this high demand for housing, and it had to be met through creating tiny modules and placing these out and assembling and placing them on site. So there was this later on. This obstacle did come into the picture later on, that designs were limited, and there was this, due to this limitation, the demand for modularization had began to go down a little. And this started off, the situation of modularization started off, and there was high demand, and there was less skilled labor at the time, and there were there was a lot of things to do, a lot of modules to make, but there were few people, a labor shortage of sorts. So, and they weren't that skilled at it either. So when this balance began to come to this picture, when things began to get balanced out, and modularization was the popularity began to drop, because okay, the we had evened out in terms of the labor aspect, and the designs were pretty much coming off as very typical, or let's say you could say very prominent or very common everywhere. There was no speciality aspect to it, exclusive things of what a homeowner would pretty much desire. So in that case, I think modernization did go down a little. And since you were talking about the integration of BIM today, I mean, what it has come back into the construction world, and it has come back with new weapons in hand. I think if we talk about BIM integration, so this is where complexities, the element of complexity and uniqueness comes into play. So I think those concerns can also now be addressed. That with softwares like Revit and fabrication, we can definitely collaborate more easily and basically address these concerns, these requirements of the client to a greater extent, and basically achieve more uh, precision or closeness to what the customer actually requires. So I think modules would have evolved a lot due to this BIM presence here.
Yeah, with the on that note, with the integration of BIM, or building information modeling, the 3D era has far surpassed and improved the 2D era. In that sense, what I mean is the days of the drafting board, if there was clash mitigation, you had to compare one design to another design to another and hope that you had it all figured out. Through the elevations and plan views. Now we can mitigate any kind of clash, especially with the modular construction, through the 3D platforms, thus getting rid of the old drafting tables, getting rid of the old erasers, and negating that, and now doing it all through collaborative platforms.
Yes, and while we talk about the collaborative platforms, that BIM integration also, like has played a huge role in the smart project management. In today's world, how Paul you were saying about clash coordination and resolving all those clashes. In today's world, we have construction clouds, we have all those new softwares for the collaboration to define the schedule. From 3D to we have gone to 4D to 5D. Your time management, your cost management, and all the schedule. It is fixed now. We walk in a line. Previously, we were not walking in a line. Multiple people were walking in multiple lines and then trying to meet the end. So in today's world, the smarter project management approach has also come through these collaborative softwares. And again, then the fabrication shops, the CAD and CAM and the CNC integration, the CNC machines, these new advantage of technology, how you do not have to go join two pipe spools by welding yourself. Now you have machines doing that for you, doing multiple pipes at once. And so, like you have particularly worked in that industry. You have seen the fabrication shops. You have owned them. You have owned the spools yourself for yourself. So, what do you think? Like how the technology has developed over the time from is sorry hand sketching is spool to today's machine era.
Yeah. So, back in the older days, you would have two benders, and they would be a manual bender that looked like a pickaxe of sort with a rounded head. And nowadays, you have two benders that take our designs. They bend it per the parameters that we've integrated or embedded in the models, and it's a much quicker process and much more accurate process and matches the model. So we go from that collaborative design to a accurate tube set, and for example, it'll take two tube sets and weld them together. We've got tiger stop saws, and which are pure cutoff saws, and tube benders and welders, and we also have dirty saws that do whole saw and cut off, and eventually we're going to see technology change once again, and it's going to take those cut off pieces and it's going to join them, and eventually the people that are actually doing the work are going to be more or less managing the work as we get into more automation.
Supervising as we go into the era of IoT, Internet of Things, and everything will be computerized. Yeah, you are correct in that sense. So while we talk about the advantages and advancement and the popular modernization in modern era, we have faced the advantages. We have worked in the industry for long, and we have seen how it has impacted for good and also for bad. But they are some of the contractors out there who would like to use moderation. And it also depends, like I'm not saying it's their choice. It also depends on the project size. If you have a big project, it becomes, if you want to save the cost, if you want to save the time, you gotta do moderation. But if it is a small size project, then you do not really think the need. What do you think about that, Vinayak? Do you think the size of the project, the area, square feet area, linear footage of the pipe, or your elements matter in that?
Ayush, I think complexity and size does play a significant role in this. For example, if I'm building a small facility wherein there's very few items that are actually they're identical to each other, there isn't much of a time constraint involved. So I could look into other options other than modularization, and
Yes.
I'll have to consider modularization given the situation where it creates a greater impact in my construction schedule. That it creates a greater impact in terms of time and money, and of the quality of work. And speaking of the CAD and CAM that we spoke of in the previous slide, and smarter manufacturing methods, that what modularization now brings to it. So it's becoming more of a it's beginning to get the edge in this dilemma that people may have, that whether to modularize or not to modularize. So it's given the tools that are pretty much integrating into the concept of modularization, as we spoke of, BIM and fabrication. And if you also look at, workflows for modularization now, that, softwares like Stratus are pretty much connecting people who are creating these drawings, these modular drawings, and the guy who's actually fabricating these pipes and setting these jobs up. So those two people are now basically, that their gap has now been bridged, and so that is further reducing the process time and bringing more greater transparency. So I think the disadvantages are beginning to diminish as they're getting addressed to a greater extent, and all given the support from the BIM elements. So certainly modularization does have its certain situation where you may have to think about how much of an impact is it going to make, but I think it's that gap is now beginning to close now.
Well, the biggest, disadvantage is the initial investment that it is going to take to you set up your fabrication shop. So that's going to take time, with the technology being developed over time, and you don't have to purchase huge or big machines. You have to purchase, something compact. So that will come with time. Although the transportation and the site access that thoroughly can come over. We can always figure out a way on that part. But while Vinayak, you talked about the easy installation, and you talk about the speed, you talk about the how the gap between two people has compressed, and they have more time on their hands now. So yeah, the speed and efficiency due to modernization has increased a lot, and then there is quality control due to the BIM softwares. Then we have the cost savings, the advantage of the cost saving, and correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, but in each and every construction projects, the cost matters more than the time schedule on that.
Yeah, so that's a very good point, Ayush. A lot of people think that the initial investment, or sometimes the cost to do modularization exceeds the value, and that's not necessarily the case, because a lot of people don't necessarily look at the overall cost. The overall cost is what's more important, bottom line, let's call it. So the initial investment in some modular construction may be a little bit higher, but in the end, the amount of cost savings. Let's talk about rework. Let's talk about the amount of people that we've had on a project due to the inefficiency of the build. So all of those add up. So modular is definitely a cost savings, a better quality control, an easier installation, less bodies, less trade stacking, and you've got that weather. Weather's always a factor. So yeah, there are some issues, some disadvantages, transportation, site access. Usually those are overcome knowing the fact that, hey, we got modules coming in. An initial investment might be a little bit higher, but the overall budget probably comes in lower.
So correct on that. And while you talk about these installation and those point, I think in previous era or previous time, while we were not using the modernization, we were taking all this stuff, all elements on site, and then deciding as per the design or the layouts that we were getting from the designers. And then we were resolving the clashes. But sometimes, people, they are getting they want to work with the schedule, so they'll cut their pieces, they'll cut their spools, and when they go, oh, it's not fitting. So now that is a wastage. But the moderation has covered that material wastage as well. You can easily make it useful again in in a different area, or in a different site itself. You just have to identify, and using the BIM softwares, using the digitalization of these things, you can easily identify. So yeah, moderation has its advantages over disadvantages, and you're right. With time, everything will be taken over with these things. But what the while we are talking about the moderation advantage and disadvantages, there is an impact from the traditional ways to the modular ways. Uh, and I would like Paul or Vinayak, anyone of you, to take the lead on this. What do you think the impact has it occurred from a particular time, or is it in a good way, is it in a bad way?
Yeah, schedules, immediately improve. A lot of people don't take that as a consideration. From planning and design, looking at modularization, that can take a little bit less time because we're thinking more of a modular instead of how do we lay this all out. Foundation, you're looking about the same time. Offsite manufacturing, you can cut schedules almost in half, 20 to 50% less on a schedule, especially when you're in a time crunch because you've got an offsite fabrication and a quicker installation. Which as we expressed is 3 to 6, and then the rework and the overrun in schedule has been reduced from 4 months next to nothing. So I agree 100% with that, Ayush.
The impact is there. Vinayak, what do you think?
I think with the time aspect, definitely we're cutting down on labor costs. We are also cutting down on the material wastage. The material wastage is that's just not only the modularization aspect in play here, but that's the pretty much the whole driving of the concept of BIM here and clash coordination through Navis. So definitely, I think the fabricators and fab shops they're also realizing this differences about what BIM when integrated with the concept of modularization is basically how that is impacting construction and the construction schedules. And I agree with Paul said earlier about site access aspect was also is also something to address here, because definitely you won't be having so many people on site, and workflows on site would also be much more simplified. If we have few people, we just have a simple thought of, yeah, the modules will be coming in and not the entire team, and they'd be assembling, and then there would be the indirect inventory that would be associated with getting the modules assembled on site and having to worry about those equipments and how they're going to basically help in putting things together on site. So once you have, at these fab shops, you have these specialized equipment, you have these more precision manufacturing tools with you, and that using those tools, you have them at a fab shop, a covered surface, with a roof on it, so you won't have to worry about weather delays also. So I think that all just adds up to the quality aspect, the time aspect, the cost aspect of modularization, and how it pretty much plays together and brings about a 20 to 50% quicker
Yeah, to add to that,
assemblies.
we were talking earlier about the laydown areas or the access. If you think about how many trades might be on any given site and the amount of laydown areas that are required, you can immediately reduce that. And then, so access, yeah, may be an issue because you're bringing in a larger structure. But if you reduce the laydown areas, I'm sure that a lot of places can more easily accommodate site access.
And that is part of your like smarter project management system as well, to decide the time schedule, to decide the dashboard, to do the coordination with the multiple stakeholders. So either the impact is there, and the time we have constrained that we previously, like it has mentioned, for average project site, it will take 2 years or 24 months to develop that, but they have compressed it to 12 months, and that is a huge approach, with digitalization, with BIM, and with modernization. So along with that, so sorry about it, it messed. So the challenges that comes with modernization. There is, like multiple challenges we have seen. And while we were talking about the industry disadvantages, there was the initial cost. So that is the industry adoption part. And then how, like you mentioned in the previous era, like when we were in the 1900s, where there was this like it was not much, it did not got much popular because of the not so flexible designs, because of the labor shortage. So currently in today's world also we are seeing the skills and workforce training. Is that correct statement or not? And then we have those regulatory and permit frameworks. That is also a challenge that we are facing in today's era. So what do you think about all these challenges that comes with the modernization?
Yeah,
I think yeah, please go on, Paul. Okay, so so I think industry and skills and workforce training, these two aspects are kind of working together here and posing as a challenge, as one big challenge here together. That if you look at things from a fab shop manager, or from a fab shop of some perspective, so there would be this case that I have a certain workforce with me here. I have to assess what their skill sets are. I have to know what are they familiar with the softwares that are pretty much churning out these modules now. I mean, your softwares. Speaking of softwares like Revit and Fabrication CAD, and so these softwares are pretty much preparing these modules out. I'll have to first ensure that my workforce is trained on these softwares. They need to understand what's driving these softwares. What are the items that are critical to actually creating these reliable modular drawings, spool drawings. So, industry adoption aspect and skills and workforce would be pretty much. I'll have to first consider the cost aspect to train my workforce here. I'll have to first become aware of this myself. And when you're buying the concept of modularization, you in today's era, you definitely have to visit the side of BIM that is basically driving this towards precision today. So as a fab shop manager, I would have to consider these constraints as well. That where I would have to consider the softwares, training them, and basically giving certain amount of time to basically begin to produce reliable drawings on these. I have to get myself on that platform to actually liaise with teams who are already working on these BIM enabling softwares. So that would involve a certain amount of time, training, and cost. And this would all be basically part of accepting this technology and adopting it, as the first point says here.
Yeah, on that note, to bolster the point, industry adoption is a major point, and unfortunately, people don't always understand the full ramification and or savings or quality that they're getting with modularization. So yeah, industry adoption is a factor. The skilled workforce, like Vinayak was saying, we can reduce that workforce and change the learning curve time with modularization because we don't need as many bodies. There is a body count reduction in most cases when you go with modularization, not just only on the build, but the installation as well.
But what about the regulatory and permit frameworks? I'm guessing here at this point, like moderation, as you mentioned, Paul, and as you mentioned, Vinayak, like industry adoption is there, and the people are they have to do an investment in the learning and the training of the software, training the workforce, and that is part of the industry adoption. And then how you mentioned about people still are hesitant or they do not understand the significance of it. That is why they are not adapting to it. So, but if like in certain countries, in certain areas of the world or the globe, BIM is mandatory. Right. So if that is a regulatory or permit framework, is it a requirement? If it becomes a requirement, or is not required, or there are constraints over that, will is that can be a challenge, or that is something that can be overcome.
A lot of times it can be overcome. In some instances, let's look at a permitting body, and they don't necessarily understand the concept. So a lot of cases, you'll have to build a preliminary concept, show the regulatory commission, whatever it is, and then get their buy-in. So yeah, it can be a challenge, but a lot of times that can be overcome. It's just understanding of the modularization concept.
Yes. And when we overcome the challenges, we come to the new era. So what does the future holds for modernization? What is the digital next internet or next orbit for modernization? So they have been like we have seen complexities, the addressing complex, the robotics and the automation. So I'd like to talk about robotics and automation. I have come across a particular contractor within European region, and they are building like condos, the modular homes, and they are building societies. They are using robotics. They have their fab is robotic, and it is completely automated. So that brings me to question: is future is coming, or we are already on the first step of the future? Because it is going to develop from now on. We are here. I think we are here. We have like grasped that, and it's going to be developed, and that is just the next stage coming in that like automation, the AI, and the machine learning, the robotics. So is there a concept? What do you think? Do you agree with that? Is future here, Paul? What do you think?
I think we're in our infancy of the future to come. I think robotics and automation is in certain industries. Take cars, for example. They are a module of sort. However, we are in our infancy. AI will play a big part of that. The data aspects and what we do with the data, and thus comes the modules, because when you are building with automation, AI integration, you're going to look at how much can I pack in that box. And so I think, again, we're just at our infancy. I think in the next 10 to 15 years, we're going to see this come to some kind of full bloom.
Vinayak, what do you think? Like, I totally agree with Paul on this point. It's going to come, and like the robotics and the machines, they are the changes. The AI is the change. So, and like, what does the future hold for digitalization? What is your take on that, man?
I think if you look at the keywords here on this slide, Ayush, there's robotics, automation, there's AI and ML. It's all working together
Yeah.
from pretty much end to end. AI is coming over to the softwares that we work on, this BIM softwares, BIM enabling softwares that we work on, and it goes all the way to assist all the way with robotics and automation at the guys who are working at the fab shop. So what we're basically addressing here is we are optimizing the processes, and
Yes.
we're addressing complexities in preparation of these modules. Tighter and more difficult or complex connections can now be made, addressed, and their possibilities can be considered. And once you consider that possibility, you get to know, you further explore the applications of that certain set structure or a module. So you begin to basically analyze that where all aspects can this help in, and how can I actually further optimize it through machine learning, through AI, how I can basically build better modules, or modules that are more specific to the customer's demand. So speaking of modularization, the demerits of one of the demerits that we spoke of was its lack of flexibility, which is now getting addressed through these tools now. So definitely in the future, I think it's more of a fine tuning of these tools, and which would basically be optimizing these workflows, these things carry on in the future. I think
You're correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
Please go on. Yeah.
So you're correct in that, like the AI, the machine learning, VR, AR, 3D printing, we are working together with that in this today's era, and it is developing, it is changing from every day. And 3D printing itself, it was a notion couple of like years back, and now it is here, and now it is working. A lot of our automobile industry, a lot of our other industries are using 3D printing and using robotics, and in the construction industry we have seen the value of VR and AR, and now the integration with the AI, integration with the on-site development, on-site clash coordination, on time scheduling on that. So it has come, and it has taken a new step for all of the construction industry. So on that note, modular construction in a way has their disadvantage, has their advantage, and people are hesitant to use it, and people are using it more than others. So it has taken a step, and from the residential like segment when it got started, to the commercial, to the industrial, and today's construction industry is developing on the note of that. So moderation with digitalization, with BIM, with AI, with VR, with AR has taken another step in the industry, and I think it is for the good. It is for the saving of the time, saving of the cost, making easy installation, make people's life easy. In short, it makes life easier. So, is there anything you want to add to that? At the end of the day, we want to have easy ongoing work, right? So moderation has done that. You do not have to worry. It saves lives. You do not have to make it is not complex anymore. It is not your traditional installation, your traditional construction. So yeah, on that note, we are there. We are on the first step of the future. We have come like too far with modernization in the construction industry. We have developed over the course of time. So on that note, like I would like to thank you all for joining our BIM series, for for hearing us out to this podcast. Please do let us know your thoughts in the comments, and if you have any concerns or questions about that, we'll definitely get back to you. Thank you, Paul. Thank you for joining today's session.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. You have a good day.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye bye.
Goodbye.